Hello, I'm Ollie, and this is Criminally, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, crime, specifically this novel, Get Carter by Ted Lewis. The book was published in 1970 and originally titled Jack's Return Home. The reason for that title will become apparent when I tell you what the plot is. But obviously, it was filmed the year later in 1971 as Get Carter, with Michael Caine in the lead role of Jack Carter. Very famous film, one I have to say I've never seen. I don't know how I've managed to not see it over all these years, given how often it is on telly over here as well. But yes, I've never seen the film, so I need to make sure I put that right, especially after reading the book, because the book is phenomenal. It was far better than I expected. I picked it up on Kindle in a Kindle monthly deal or something like that a while ago for 99p, and it's kind of just been sitting on my Kindle unread. And given that I'm doing this 100 book challenge at the moment, where I have to read 100 books I already own, I thought I was kind of flicking through my Kindle and came across it and thought I'd give it a try, and it was so good. Let me tell you what the story is. So the story is, Jack Carter, who's their protagonist, is a kind of young hard man basically, who lives in London but was originally from the north of England, and works for a couple of brothers who are gangsters up in London, who are, I don't know if they're supposed to be based on the Craterins, but they are, a nasty couple of guys who've got various dodgy businesses, and Jack is kind of an enforcer for them. Anyway, his brother has died, and Jack goes back up north to, I think I read somewhere it's Scunthorpe, but I'm not sure that was apparent in the book. But anyway, a kind of grim northern town, to go to his brother's funeral, but also to find out how his brother died. So his brother supposedly died in a car crash when driving while drunk, but Jack doesn't believe that story. And the book is about him basically trying to investigate the cause of his brother's death and get his revenge on the people who caused it. So plot-wise, it's fairly, it's fairly obvious in a way what's going to happen, and it's a very linear plot. But there's a fantastic twist towards the end when you find out why what happened to Jack's brother actually happened to him, and the detail and the tension along the way is phenomenal. It's an incredibly bleak book, and it reminded me a bit of Barry Hines' novel, The Kestrel for a Knave, which came out 2 years before. So that came out in 68 and again was very famously filmed the year later in 69 as Kes. And if you don't know that book's about a young kind of teenage boy growing up again in the north of England in the same sort of time period, who finds a kestrel and kind of tames it, and it gives him like a new purpose in life, I suppose. It's an incredibly good and very moving book, but it's and very different from Get Carter in most ways. But where it's similar is in its very bleak, grim depiction of life in working class northern England, and that is very much the backdrop to Get Carter. There's some not only the bit where Jack is going round, kind of beating people up and investigating and getting involved in, learning about the various crimes that are going on and things like that. Just some of the incidental detail is really grim. Like there's a bit where he visits someone, just this guy, to talk to him about his brother, and it becomes apparent that the guy's wife is a prostitute who's basically doing a job out of the back room while the kids are watching TV in the front. There's another scene in a pub where Jack has just gone into the pub to have a drink basically, and completely incidental to the rest of the plot, this massive brawl breaks out that starts off when one of the female patrons gets offended because the stripper's paying her fellow too much attention. She chucks the drink over him and the stripper, and it then descends into first a cat fight and then an out and out brawl within the pub. Jack just kind of wanders off. So yeah, really, it feels like a very bleak existence, and I think there was a wave of books and films around that time, so kind of late 60s into the 70s, that really told the story of life in northern England in a way that hadn't been told before, and this feels like it's very much part of that. And I think Ted Lewis, the author, is also credited with starting a new kind of noir movement in Britain, and this does really feel like a noir novel in terms of the themes of kind of revenge and petty crime and things like that, and the language as well. So I'm going to read you a couple of sections from the book, just so you get a sense of that language, because it's really great. This is the opening of the book. The rain rained. It hadn't stopped since Euston. Inside the train it was close, the kind of closeness that makes your fingernails dirty even when all you're doing is sitting there looking out of the blurring windows, watching the dirty backs of houses scudding along under the half-light clouds, just sitting and looking and not even fidgeting. So that, I think, is very much that kind of bleakness, that kind of almost, you know, the sense of people just waiting as their lives pass them by, you know, because they've got nothing else to do. So yeah, I thought that was a fantastic opening. It gripped me right from the start. So here's another section that I think just encapsulates beautifully the kind of day-to-day humdrum of everyday life. There were a couple of yobbos playing a disc-only fruit machine. There was an old dad with a half a bitter and the racing green, and sitting next to him there was a very old brass in a trouser suit, leaving her lipstick all over a glass of Guinness. So a brass, for American viewers who may not know, is kind of a tarty woman, often an older tarty woman. And here's one of the kind of more hard-boiled sections. The yobbo drew back to have a go. He thought the movement made him look tough, but all it did was to make him slow. I gave him one in the stomach. His Walker Brothers hairstyle flopped over his face and he sank to his knees on the steps. His mate watched him go all the way down, then slowly turned his gaze on me. Do you want some? I said. Or do you only work as a double act? The yobbo didn't answer. I walked past him and his mate, who by now was resting his forehead on one of the steps, trying to remember how he'd happened to get such a terrible pain in his gut. And then this was probably my favourite line in the kind of hard-boiled sense. I punched his face until my fist got slippery, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. So yeah, a really, really good book, far better than I was expecting. Very dark, so the kind of twist that comes towards the end of the book, where you find out what's really going on, it is really quite grim and horrible. And you know, some of the actions that Jack takes are pretty horrible too. So it's got to be said, as a protagonist, he's definitely more of an anti-hero than a hero. He's a bit of a shit, to be honest with you. He's well, he's horrible to most of the people he meets. In particular, he's frequently horrible to women. And worth saying in this book, and I think this is maybe part of the kind of atmosphere that the author's trying to build in terms of the setting. But yeah, it's definitely got tons of sexism in it, tons of racism, tons of homophobia. So it's, you know, in that sense, it can be quite hard going at times. And I'm not saying that Ted Lewis was any of those things, but certainly many of the characters, you know, hold views like that and are not shy about coming forward about them in the book. But yeah, overall, a fantastic book. It turns out I've got another Ted Lewis book I haven't read on my Kindle, GBH. I don't know if GBH is a commonly known term around the world. So in England, it's an offence, stands for grievous bodily harm. So that sounds like it's probably quite violent as well. So I will be reading that one soon, definitely, because I absolutely love Get Carter. It was very good indeed. As always, hope you enjoyed the video. I really appreciate your time. I know that there are many distractions out there, so the fact that you've chosen to watch me babble on is a great compliment to me, so thank you. If you've read Get Carter, let me know in the comments, or any of other Ted Lewis's books. But aside from that, I will leave you to your days. Hope you are all fit and well and keeping safe, and I will speak to you again soon. Cheerio.